Hello, everyone. Welcome back to NOXTalks. My name is Ari West. I am here with Connor Goopy Kanoopy Knutson.
Yep.
Today is a special day. I know, don't you just love his name?
Oh my God.
It's a mouthful and it's hilarious.
That's tough.
Today, we are joined by some of the collegiate leaders here in Oklahoma, and we are going to just have a nice little collegiate roundtable discussion about esports here in the state. We'll kind of go through some like past, present, future plans here for esports in Oklahoma. But without further ado, I actually want to introduce all of our guests. So Colt, if you could start.
Yeah. Hi, I am Colt Berry. I'm the student manager here at Rogers State University in Claremore, Oklahoma.
Awesome. And I'm Mike Moog Aguilar, the Director of Esports and Co-Curricular Innovation for the University of Oklahoma. And yeah, Lucas.
Nice to meet y'all again. My name's Lucas Hayworth. I'm the Director of Esports at Oklahoma Christian University, and we're an athletic program.
And my name is Paul Vaughn. I'm the esports coordinator and head coach for Oklahoma City University.
Nice. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Connor, anything you want to
Just really quick, kind of the purpose of today's episode, there's obviously going to be, this is a roundtable. We're really excited to hear what all these individuals have to say individually, and then as well as, I think this is going to be really cool because it kind of gives us a collective vision as to where Oklahoma is in the state with esports. Obviously, us as Equinox don't really represent the collegiate scene per se, but we want to be allies. We want to be partners to these collegiate universities, people kind of pioneering this in the Midwest and in Oklahoma. So I'm personally just very excited to be here today to have this conversation. And thank you again, the four of you, for coming on. I'm excited to keep talking.
Yeah,
Yep,
for sure.
Of
Okay, guys, so let's kind of jump into the past, the present, and the future of collegiate esports here in the state. So where even were we 5 years ago? Does anyone even remember? Because there wasn't a whole lot going on.
Yeah.
Colt, do you
Your
want to
time
take
to
that
shine,
off as the resident energy of one of the first collegiate energies in the state?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have been in a program now for 3 years officially, and then 4 years as if you count our student club. So we started as a student club 4 years ago, and then now we've been officially under student affairs as a just like an intermission, intermediate sport. Pretty much at Rogers State University. So then now we're on year 3 as being affiliated with our university, and now we're here. We're not a student club anymore. We've been a student intermission, whatever it's called. Or
Institutionally supported
Yeah.
esports development.
yeah, thank you.
Yep.
For sure.
Uh,
So
I read
actually,
a perspective. Go ahead. Sorry.
Colt, tell me a little bit about that transition too, because I just so some people know, you might not know, I actually have some background in higher education esports as well. I worked at UCO for 4 years, and for 2 of those years, I was helping to pioneer the UCO esports program there as well. They're also institutionally affiliated now as well. But can you tell me a little bit about your process and basically how that growth was for you? Because like going from a student club to like a recognized university energy is huge.
Yeah. So when we started, I started back in, or when I was a sophomore at Rogers State University, around the August, whatever. And then I just started, it's called Consoles and PCs, our student organization. And then I built it for about a year, and I just had an insane amount of growth as soon as I started. I had about 50 students to 60 students who came and actually enrolled to be in our student organization and wanted to be a part of it. And then after about that year, and that's sometime that summer, the Larry Rice, president of Rogers State University, came to me and was like, hey, we have this idea of esports, so we wanted to hop on, and we need to know some more about it, and like we want a plan to do. So I said, that sounds awesome. I would love to do that. And then he went off of our already students we had, as well as our current. We have we got a reward for the best new organization on campus, best new events, because we had the highest amount of students at these events, about 30, 60, 70, keep growing and growing. And then so he just came and asked us about what we should do, and I was like, honestly,
Wow.
if you want to do this, we need to be building teams. And I told him what games to play, and he's like, okay, what do you think about an arena? And we're like, oh, okay, that's awesome. So he basically just said we're gonna get an arena, and we turned an old classroom
Wow.
into a esports stadium, and then we just started building our program from there. So that was just kind of, it all came really fast, but about a year or so, I just transitioned, and it just came to me. I didn't really have to do too much, but I had to build that stable root of the club though for him to see and want to do that. So
That's actually amazing, because usually it's the other way around, right? It's the students and the staff leadership having to go to the university and kind of pitch for why esports should be the next thing for them, right? So that's really cool to hear, actually, Colt. Mike, you probably want to jump in because OU's
Yeah,
energy.
I'm a little frozen. Let me come back to a second while I figure that out.
Oh, okay. Oh no.
If I can interject,
Yeah, go.
it's actually kind of funny. So I'm not sure if everyone knows, but I'm a Boise State alumni. So I was the club
Boise
founder
State.
before it became a varsity program. The way that actually came about was we had a club. We had been established for about 6 months, and then the school had already had plans that had started much earlier to create a varsity program. But universities take a while to kind of get things going. There's a lot of red tape. He actually eventually came to us and asked if we wanted to start competing in some of these leagues that were around at the time. So 2017, it was basically like just TESPA. There was CELOL, but we were already too late for that. So we had a Overwatch team that actually ran that year. That's kind of how that program actually ended up getting started.
Wow. Okay.
Nice.
Congrats.
I feel like so many universities like end up getting. I'm very biased, so for those that don't know me, this is my first time meeting a lot of you face to face, by the way. So appreciate you guys talking to me, and this is great to get to know you already. But I got my start in Overwatch with writing, and I feel like a lot of universities actually end up almost there as well. It seems like Overwatch, for whatever reason, maybe this is the case because a lot of universities started around 2 years ago, but it seems like Overwatch is at the start of a lot of collegiate programs.
Yeah.
Is that wrong or right? What do you guys think?
Can I talk about that for a sec?
Sure.
Please do.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on this, because I'm new to the collegiate esports scene, or even just the professional esports development scene in general. I started basically when they hired me on, but I've been a consumer of esports since forever, pretty much. And my take on how collegiate has developed, especially with the advent of games, is, well, for example, Overwatch is actually the easiest one to talk about because it's ran by Blizzard, AAA developer, and the launch of Overwatch was around 2016, right? And the earliest collegiate programs were back in that day. And so a lot of the fresh talent that was just grinding their way to GM, top 500, etc., they didn't have an established scene for them to go to, and the earliest developers of collegiate were targeting that specific niche audience, and mostly by accident, but they targeted them well enough to where they enticed them to come to play college for esports, especially Overwatch. And then Hearthstone came out, all that other stuff. Blizzard was like a mainstay, and that's why TESPA is so big. Recently, TESPA was broken off from Blizzard, but we'll see what they do next. But that's a mainstay example of why Overwatch developed into the first major collegiate scene, is just because of timing. And now we're starting to see that with Valorant and a lot of the newer collegiate programs that are just starting up within the last 6 months or so. They're heavily pushing for Valorant, and so we'll see how that goes as well.
Mike, thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's always culture coupled with support from the developer themselves, and so Overwatch is a testament to that. But even before that was Heroes of the Dorm series with Heroes of the Storm, which was like a $70,000 to $80,000 scholarship prize pool, which is still unheard of even now. But unfortunately, burned and died, and even had ESPN front-facing coverage, and it was a big deal as the Rosin twins, which were spawned from Longhorn Gaming and UT, which was the birth of TESPA as well back in 2013, 2012. Kind of came into the scene to really kind of elevate the opportunities of what could be done in the collegiate realm. And then we saw things like CSL, EPGL, Riot's own CLOL series, and everything else kind of spawned. And it's a marriage between the cultural need of demand that we represent in the space, coupled with the intentionality of obviously the developer. And so you have some titles like Rocket League, which didn't need much support and allowed for the CRL and Psyonix to kind of create this really cool community around it that wasn't super regulated by the IP holder themselves, and it's become one of the most formidable communities in itself, versus the more business aligned intentionality of Blizzard Activision and what we're seeing with COD and Overwatch and what's to come here from the post TESPA era this semester.
I think this is a great point. I kind of want to jump in here. So we're kind of like working through almost telling the story of how Collegiate Esports has spawned, and we're getting into that right now. I think the interaction with TESPA in this narrative is very interesting to me because, it's not anything close to like a full governing body necessarily, like an NCAA type thing, but it was the closest thing we've seen to that for, an Activision Blizzard title. So now that we're kind of seeing that dissolve, like what kind of to ask you guys this, what is it like, from you all's perspective, working in these colleges to consider something like a governing body? Like, is it something that we think we're too young for? Is this something we should be sprinting towards as a way to kind of officiate the field? Like, what are the thoughts from you all here? Whoever wants to jump in first.
I'm very opinionated on this. but I want to hear everyone else first.
Okay.
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 I think it
Who
has
wants to
pros
go?
and
I'll take
cons.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, I think there's pros and cons for it. The big cons, which I want to jump into first, is it hurts a lot. It'll short term, absolutely, it will hurt players. A lot of regulating bodies, like the NCAA, kind of stop college players from being able to do much for themselves. Takes away a lot from what they can do individually. It would mean like no more Twitch streaming, no more tournament freelancing, playing in those small cash tournaments that pop up every weekend. So short term, it could absolutely hurt them. It also could be a loss for some of these smaller schools that have been doing work in like the League of Legends scene. There's Columbia College, which they won't have the chance to compete against these larger schools anymore if they get put into division that's like the NAIA. As a potential pro, these set divisions and leagues for schools and states that are on the border, like Oklahoma, we've been regulated into East, West, Central, Southwestern, and we've never really get to play against the same schools ever because every single league considers us to be a part of a different sector of the United States. And so it's so hard to create these rivalries, which makes it so hard for schools that don't already have these rivalry systems to be able to attract viewerships to their matches. So that could be a potential pro of the NCAA, an NCAA-like organization. But
Sure. Cole, do you have a comment?
I think the need for governance is absolutely, paramount. But the thing is we've already been adhering to governing bodies ever since. But the difference between us and conventional sports is that nobody owns football or basketball or baseball. We only are sold versions of it under the banner of the NBA, NFL, NHL, and so forth. Well, that's no different than CLOL. That's the governing body for League of Legends, period. There's no TESPA for the longest time was the collegiate governing body, no matter what. And then you have these third parties like NACE or ECAC or some of these other conferences that are starting to spin up. And the reality is that you're not going to make Blizzard Activision and Riot Games come to the same table and see eye to eye. It's just not going to happen. Those two companies operate very differently from a cultural standpoint, but the intentionality of their programs and IP. So you're not going to have a single governing board that's going to be fluid. You're going to have a multitude of governing boards for however long the laws of IP control and trademarking exist. Period. So many people are so quick to dash towards a finish line that doesn't even exist. And that's important. So this is the name of the game in esports. You're going to have many gods to serve, many lords of the realm to serve, and you just have to be adaptable for each specific title. Call of Duty culture, very different from Hearthstone culture. And so you can't treat them identically the same, nor does the coaching structures, curriculums, or anything like that entirely translate between the two. And that's the power of what we can do in the innovation space with this topic versus trying to fit everything in a pre-existing definition when we don't really need that. That inhibits the innovation of this topic and the opportunity to really explore what it could be, because we're not even really scratching the surface of organizational infrastructure. And that's just the competitive arm, never mind the curriculum, research, academic opportunities, and so forth. And so we have to be very delicate with that, because if we're so quick to fall under governance and be servants to it, then we're going to miss the opportunity of creating those things, because we're in the time before the NCAA existed. And most people can't fathom a world prior to the NFL or the NCAA. Right. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think like esports, like especially in the collegiate scene where we are right now, like we have such an opportunity for flexibility right now and adaptability. So we can, I think like we could come together and like there are things that we could maybe do for each title. Yeah. I personally, just coming from the collegiate scene myself, like I personally am against an NCAA style rulership over certain game titles, or at least like an overarching umbrella. But I do see the need for some kind of regulation and some kind of just a way to like help streamline things, because there are so many different ways you can launch and run a collegiate program, and there's different ways you can run your tournaments, and that makes it hard to like find a level playing field to compete against other colleges and stuff like that. So I always found that struggle. I
want to drive one point home to really nail that in the coffin for the perspective of the viewership. Lucas, where's your program housed under?
Under athletics.
Colt.
Student affairs.
Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Ours is under arts and sciences.
And I was originally under IT and student affairs.
Yeah.
There is very little similarity between even these four Oklahoma universities.
And I want to give Colton and Lucas time to answer this question as well, because I think this is a really good discussion. But really quick, I think, Mike, that in your point, you hit home on several different things that I think you just drove home even more. And that is that whether it's IP we're talking about, whether it's game-specific curriculum, whether it's department, this is all so compartmentalized differently that there almost can't be one uniform governing body because of the individuality of how the schools are doing it. But I really like the point about curriculum with different titles, because this is one thing where, like, student athletes for the most part who are playing football, basketball, soccer have pretty similar college experience in the sense that they practice, they have their classes, etc. For esports athletes, it might be the same in that you're practicing the same way, but that structure within those practices is so fundamentally different from game title to game title. It's just that's a really fascinating observation, Mike. I just wanted to again drive that home more. So, but Lucas and Colt want to give you guys time on this question as well.
On the same topic of the leagues and everything.
Sure.
Yeah, NCAA style
governance.
Governing bodies.
I do agree with Paul that it could definitely hurt players a lot, especially with your revenue in between players and everything you do like that, as well as when you're having these different contracts. I don't know if any of our schools have contracts for players. That's something we're trying to work with, but that's really hard for us to push legally to add a revenue policy into our contracts for players, because that's just something that they won't want to have. So if the NCAA or anything like that pops up, that's going to completely destroy that. And then only thing that they're winning now is going to have to go straight to scholarships if we even get that. Depending on, it's really just going to hurt our player base. But I do think it would benefit us in a lot of ways, because personally, I do think there's way too many leagues out there, like CSL, NACC, ECAC, and TEST. But there's just so many that when you come into the scene, it's really hard to understand what's a popular one and what's one that's going to waste our time, that's not going to go anywhere, if that makes sense. Not going to offend any leagues, but there's just so many that it's hard to understand which ones you're going to be put in, everything like that. I do think it would be cool if they would do one by division maybe, but then that also affects, if you do it by division of school, that also affects players, high tier players coming to low D2 JUCO schools, and then just dominating the scene of these divisions. So that's kind of the fear as well. But I do agree that I think every game probably should figure out a way to make a collegiate, like how Riot Lola has theirs. I think that every game title, everybody in charge of that game should probably figure out a league for colleges and make that their main league that play in. So when new people coming in, they can be like, this is the game, this is the game, this is the game, this is our league for this game, and not say, because when people come tour us, pretty much like for example, NEO came a couple of days ago or yesterday, and they're like, what do we want to join? I'm like, well, you can join any one you want. There's just a whole spreadsheet of them. Just pick which one you want to do, because it's all up to you guys. Entry fees, stuff like that. Who you think the best one is?
If I may interject really quick, that's actually been a huge complaint within esports, is that because of the fragmentation, because of the amount of leagues that there are, which could be seen as a pro because you can kind of vary what you're doing, and there's always something you can be playing in. It's meant that it's Maryville B playing in a league, and then someone beats Maryville B and says, "Hey guys, we beat Maryville." And Maryville goes, "No, you didn't. That was our B team. We actually have our A team in this league." And so it's created the super very confusing where club teams are playing against the funded programs of other schools. And then when they beat the club, they say they beat the school, but they didn't beat the school because they beat the club. And it's created this massive confusion in terms of power rankings. So that's another just part of the fragmentation that's been super frustrating for schools.
That's really good parameters for, even if you're going to have multiple leagues, at least make them leagues that are structured around, what level of competition you're at.
Sort of by rank,
division,
average rank.
Yep.
Well, and Tespo is doing that. And I know, Lucas, you need to talk because we definitely want to hear from you.
Yeah.
But Tespa in the last days, in the last year, in the 2019-2020 calendar, was adding the varsity pipelines in their tournament, starting with Hearthstone, and then eventually went into Overwatch, which was nice to see because they still took the champions from both the open brackets and the varsity pipelines and had them head-to-head after they got through the primary rankings of that. So it was still kind of dismal once you got to the final point for the teams that weren't heavily invested institutionally, but it created a much level playing field, and absolutely that's a concern.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree with all that. But there's a couple of main points. Like Mike, you tried touching on this, but you didn't really go into depth, so I want to go into depth on it. If you take League of Legends and you compare it to a traditional sport like basketball, who owns basketball and who owns League of Legends are completely different. That IP control is not just IP control, it's the game server control. If Riot decides to take League of Legends down tomorrow, the entire pro scene, collegiate scene, etc. is dead. Dead in the water. There's nothing they can do. They have 100-something years from IP protection in order to retain their rights to keep hosting the game by themselves. And if they don't decide to host it, there's no more Collegiate League of Legends. That's all it takes. They could have done that with Heroes of the Storm, because remember, I think you touched on Heroes of the Dorm and whatnot, but if they took the game servers down too, that game would be dead. All those students that got recruited early on in the collegiate esports scene on full scholarship rides and everything to play Heroes of the Storm for this event because they thought it was going to be an annual event, if that game died, that scene would have died. And not just that, since it was so early on in the development of collegiate esports, if Heroes of the Storm would have been taken offline, like fully offline, that would have been a big deal. Like colleges would be very adverse to entering into the esports scene at all, because if they recruit even just 5 people and they're giving them high scholarships to play the game, for example, Valorant, what's to say that Valorant stays alive for the next year or two? And those 5 people, they're typically acquired for a 4-year degree program, and if that game only lasts 2 years, what are they going to do with their last 2? Do they lose scholarship? Does the college grandfather them into that ordeal or whatnot? A lot of colleges, myself included, have figured that out, and we have structure around that. But early on in the development of collegiate esports, that was a question. That was a large question that literally had no answer, and there's no way to figure that out too, because a lot of this stuff is privately owned. It's all kept under wraps. Like, Riot's not going to answer an email from Oklahoma Christian University from some random student that's just like, hey, I'm just curious on what you're going to do if like Valorant dies or this doesn't go off well. I want to recruit for it, but I mean, it is what it is, you know? So you gotta try to figure that out. And then also another really good point on like the central governing bodies, that literally just cannot happen until IP for these games is fully released and controlled or open source or something like that, non-controlled or open source. Has to be open source, something like that. The other big thing is, as well, with these central governing bodies like NCAA, NAIA, etc., they all have clauses in them in their default athletic agreements that I've been able to look over and whatnot that require students not take additional money. And one of you touched on that, and that's perfectly clear to understand. Like, that needs to be perfectly understood, because streaming, content creation, etc., is a huge part of the gaming culture. It's literally what supports the gaming culture. And I mean, we're on one right now. Like, if we stopped our students or our staff,
Lucas, you're in violation of your own contract, sir. Please get out.
So if we stopped our students or our staff from streaming or participating in the betterment of their own brand, because every player is every high tier player is a cult of personality ordeal. They're all their own brand. They all have their own protection, IP rights, etc. And if we were to kind of like regulate and govern that, that would highly stop a lot of these people who are on the higher end of the skill level that want to pursue going pro and want a pipeline to pro, anything like that, to even consider going to college. College, I think, is a value-added benefit to your life. And I want to support my students in that, and by creating multiple different ways to support them and give them value that they would otherwise not have the opportunity to have if they just went and stayed at their home and streamed 24/7 and tried to go pro through that. Yeah. So like, there's ways that us as collegiate esports representatives and leaders can address these issues without needing a central governing body. It's a way for us to innovate and stand out from other universities and other programs too. And so if we were to shut that down, smaller universities like ours or any other ones that are around like less than 10K, you know, student body wise, it's much harder for us to have that pull. And so I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to create and innovate ways to support each other in that space.
For sure.
Man, Lucas,
well said,
talk your talk, dude. That was good.
Yeah, that was like full of
dude.
passion. I was here for it, dude.
So
Really good, thanks.
our school is actually a part of NACE, the National Association of Collegiate Esports. And you're the exact person that we need inside of NACE, because NACE is member driven. We vote on legislation, and constantly, like, anything that's come up that restricts players, restricts individuality, it's been constantly struck down. But we need schools like.
Let me
like
talk about this real quick. I need to interrupt you because this is another point that I forgot to talk about too. But let me try to gather my thoughts. Actually, go ahead. Let me gather my thoughts. I'm stupid, so just give me a minute.
I was pretty close to being done there. I was just going to say that,
Sorry.
NACE is a great resource for new colleges. It's been, it has a very educational centric. We meant new veteran colleges mentor the newer colleges and what to do. There's no predatory practices from what it feels like from within the organization. This great source of competition. They get licenses from the big developers because they have so many schools that are a part of that. But again, we just need to have the right mindsets and the right programs coming into these, so that legislation that could be predatory towards individual players can be struck down.
Yeah. All right, I figured out what I was going to talk about. So, the big thing about these governing bodies, NACE especially, and a couple of other ones like UCEA and all that stuff, what are the main benefits from joining these collegiate entities, especially as a smaller college who may not have funding? We're blessed to be in athletics. I have additional support from administration. I'm able to help write grants, get donations, etc., for us to support our program. But other colleges that are just starting up, they're student clubs, they don't have fundraising opportunities, they don't have support from administration. Joining NACE is it's like at least a couple grand a year.
It's $2,000.
In order to dedicate that amount of time and resources into that, there needs to be value that's greater than that amount. And NACE and other collegiate organizations right now, their main benefit that they're offering are in-house tournament leagues. You could just get that from the developer itself for free. You can join, why join NACE's League Legends division when you could just go into Riot, apply to CLO, and you get more value because you League Unlocked. There's no real current reason to dedicate such high levels of resources from a smaller school's perspective into joining these programs at university, or these university central governing body programs. Now, that's not to say in the future they don't innovate and they have a recruiting pipeline and platform and stuff like that. And I've been talking to a few of those that are kind of trying to develop those recruiting platforms, but right now there's really no benefit to doing that, and it's a waste of time and money, at least from my perspective. Now, these other pipelines and stuff for recruiting, I want to talk on that real quick. This might transition to a different segment. I mean, I'm the last one to talk, so I'm going to take that responsibility. So, colleges and esports, their main thing that every single one has in common is their reason for having an esports program. The main reason to have any sort of program on a college campus is to recruit. At the end of the day, the administration wants it to be a recruiting platform and tool. Now, how you approach why they want to recruit is where you can stand out from the monotony. So I am trying to recruit from a position of value-added benefit. I want our players, I want myself, I want everybody that's in this pipeline to get some value that they otherwise might not have had anywhere else, even in pro scene. And so I'm trying to help us to help draw benefits from that line. But other colleges that may not have as much of a cultural understanding or wealth of knowledge as us do in this talk, they might just see it as a way for kids to get together, play video games, and then if they give them a few $100, then maybe they can get a $9,000 return off of them for just coming to their college for 4 years, So they're just thinking as a paper pushing type ordeal, like a community college typically. And so I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing to say that it's a main tool for recruiting, because college is a very blessed ordeal if you can approach it the right way. It can be very predatory if you don't know what you're doing, or you're just going through a blind, you're just playing it by the motions, all that stuff. But if you really take hold of the advantages and the resources you get from going to college, you can better yourself in ways that you otherwise might not have had. And the baseline thing that you get from going to college is a network, and a network is invaluable.
That's fair.
Lucas, I'm actually going to continue on this train of thought, and we'll come back to some of the other topics that I wanted to touch on too. But since you're already driving this one forward, I did want to talk about that. So in the collegiate scene, you guys do kind of have a little bit of a gray area to work with. You get to innovate and try new things in the name of education, right? A professional organization like Equinox, we wouldn't have that liberty to do. So can you guys touch a little bit on that? I want to hear your guys' stories, difficulty in recruiting for colleges, how you keep game titles alive, because I think one thing specifically at UCO that we saw a lot is that literally from year to year, the quality of our teams dropped significantly, or they shot up significantly. Maybe Overwatch recruited a really good player and now we're a top 5 team, and the CSGO team lost 3 players. Very now literally CSGO doesn't exist at UCO, which is very unfortunate because it was one of our strongest titles. So talk to me a little bit about that, guys. Colt, if you want to start.
Let me open on that because we're an athletic program and I have a little bit of a different experience in that, and I have a different poll too. So as an athletic program, and let me kind of differentiate this from each other. So as an athletic program, we're officially recognized by the school as a club sport, which means I have the opportunity to scholarship players similarly to how they scholarship their basketball team, their bowling team, etc. And that is a blessing because, etc., like what I talked about before. I don't want to repeat myself, but having the opportunity to draw professional type players to an esport is ginormous. It's huge. So how I have structured our program as an athletic program is I'm recruiting for high tier 2 esports. Basically, I'm treating it the same as I would for a high tier 2 esports team, except you get paid a lot more than you would joining a high tier 2 esports team. So whenever I just starting up our program really these last 2 semesters, and so I'm recruiting from this level of standpoint. And most of the people that even watch Equinox, they're at least associated with Valorant, so I'm going to use that as their main reference point. So our Valorant team are all Radiant Plus. Most of them are top 500. One of them peaked top 5 in A, all that kind of stuff. And when I'm recruiting for other Valorant players, I'm looking for similar skills. I'm looking to fill in substitute roles for whatever role they're playing. I'm looking to replace them whenever they need to. Because there's no stopping one of these players from getting so cracked out of their mind that they go pro and they decide to drop out next semester. And I fully support that. I have the infrastructure to build that. But I need to replace them if that happens. And I'm perfectly fine with doing so as long as, you know, the incoming player fits the synergy and whatnot. But being able to approach it from an athletic standpoint and having that support is allowing me to bypass a lot of these issues and restraints that other colleges that don't have that support are seeing with what you just said with UCO. Like if you drop one of your pro players, like your GMs in Overwatch or something, and you're just stuck with a team of low 3,500 masters or whatever, you're not going to stand a chance to other supported colleges that are in athletics or other institutions that have the opportunity to replace at a high skill level.
Sure.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
I was going to try and throw it over to Colt, since I know he's been probably itching to speak here for a second.
Oh no,
ahead,
I'm
Colt.
okay. I'm just listening. Well, we also have scholarships as well. Theirs is probably more than ours, but we actually have. So I recruit off of using scholarships as well. But we are also a big transfer school. So a lot of my players, my biggest issue right now is that I lose players after a year or two. Being our scholarship or not, it's not enough to like fully cover anything. Just like a little books in there and a little bit like, hey, it's just like a little incentive to get here. So that is like my biggest thing is that it's a transfer school. So I basically recruit the same thing as well as he does. I try to go for the players I need that needs fit, as well as the best rankings I can find pretty much. I usually get a low pool of a lot of lower tier players, and then every now and then I'm able to pick out like a diamond or two in the higher players in Overwatch and League of Legends, and then I'll put those guys there. But a lot of our players are lower ranked players, but I also try to build off the positioning as well. But I also don't have a lot to pull on. I only have the little bit of money we have, and then the only thing I really can offer them is a jersey. We don't have a lot of things, like I don't have a website at all that I can promote players, I can promote people. I don't have anything like that. I don't have gear. I don't have anything I can give them. I don't have gear. Like if I just have something, I could probably do that off. I have a scholarship, but that scholarship doesn't help me bring in big top tier players when I have like, so for example, like I have OU. They're like, oh, why would I go here when I can just go to OU and play with all these better players? And I get that experience of playing with better players and potentially winning tournaments versus playing with you guys when I'm going to be carrying the whole time and not going to have those supportive roles. If that makes sense. Like, so versus us, versus bigger schools like OU, OSU, they could draw on a bunch of people. It's hard for me to recruit off of being a small because even a scholarship doesn't recruit the top 500 players. Like it doesn't work. So it is kind of hard and everything. Yeah.
For you, I think like a lot of the Rogers State pool is coming in and like building infrastructure and building a program, and that like has its own allure to some people. So and maybe like going off of that angle, because I know like one of my big things when I was at Oklahoma State was like I thought it was so cool that I was able to like be a part of a club that like just started, and like I got to help write the rules and the infrastructure of that. So just something to think about, that there are a lot of people out there who want to build something too.
Yeah, so, you're almost selling an entrepreneurial perspective at that point, which is great. And value, like value added. That's a great thing for students to have when they graduate as well. So
I do have a lot of students who come in and do that, like for myself as well as all of our team captains, things like that. I do have a lot of students who do that. It's just not the number I need for them versus the number I have of players. Always just fluctuates like that, so it's hard to keep up.
And
All right, Paul.
from that perspective, you can't recruit just leaders. You need some people that they can help lead. You can't have a full team of leaders, So just want to touch on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the very first thing I want to say is if you were a new program starting out, please, please, please support your current students. They're going to be the heart of your program. They're going to be the roster that's going to attract other students coming in. They're going to be basically you're going to base around your entire program around, because you're going to start out in the games that they play. It's so important that you support those students. And so that's my first point. I think secondly, you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of things that colleges are able to do differently, and kind of like the newer things we're working on. For us, it's been a lot of community-run organization and tournaments. So something we've done most recently was working with, we just kind of we throw it out there to anyone that will listen to us for more than a minute. Hey, have you guys ever considered doing something related to esports? Most recently, I think that the biggest success in that realm for us has been with Special Olympics Oklahoma. We ran a couple Rocket League tournaments with them. They're disproportionately affected by COVID because they can't meet in person to do their events. They recently had a full tournament where they did like Zoom horseshoe and like a couple other events. And then they also had a Rocket League tournament alongside that. And now that's actually getting traction on the national level. Other states are starting to create Rocket League teams within their Special Olympics groups. And we might see a like national league within Special Olympics, with Special Olympics Oklahoma being the heart of that. So that's really exciting. That's something that's awesome to see. Having our students help with that tournament has also been huge for them, giving them experience. One of our students actually went on to become an intern at Special Olympics Oklahoma, working in their esports division.
That's awesome. Mike?
All right. So it's good to get some perspective. But so one of the challenges when I first started in 2016 and really kind of ramping up scope was we've only focused heavily on activation of events and competitive energies. And there's so much more to esports. I mean, esports is a sports entertainment extension of industry. It is. And then some gamers don't like the correlation between sports and entertainment. However, it can absolutely be referenced, especially when we're educating new audiences as a reference point back. And so creating the teams is still kind of a small chip in the block of what the potential of this topic represents. And what I was really trying to drive point in the first topic of we shouldn't be creating finish lines yet. And so an Overwatch roster is at the least 6 students, and all of us have more than 6 students on our campus. So what else can we do with this topic and really exploring the needs of supporting the industry? Because for me, the definition of higher education is to build the professionals of today and tomorrow to support the industries of today and tomorrow, especially when you have the foresight of industries to come. And esports is still not here as far as a mainstream household thing across the greater scope of cultures. So this also takes us down the path of developing programs in shoutcasting, developing programs in influencer style media, news and media, community engagement. How do we grow the new TOs and community organizers? That's a skill set in itself. There's no tournament without a TO. There's no esports sponsorships and money for prize pools without production. There's no community engagement on the broader scope without influencers right now. Or there's nobody to tell the story of advocacy if there's nobody doing journalistic practicum to elevate those things. And so since day one, we focused on really kind of building that comprehensive macro view of what these opportunities in the industry actually are, instead of just fixating on path to pro in regards to competition. And so, Paul is a byproduct of that with Boise State and Doc Haskell, who I had the pleasure of meeting at a PAX South back in 2017, and really kind of went down this path of talking about journalistic practicum at the time and really kind of not letting go. And then Doc went crazy with the idea. And obviously Boise is amazing for that and still is today. And so those things are these other opportunities that will also diversify interest of student recruitment if you want to approach it from that angle. So what more can you add if you want to be maybe you're not the best at the game, but you're a just crazy Valorant fan, but you understand the meta, you understand that you have the gift of gab in a way, and understand how to do play-by-play, color casting, analytical review. Those are another skill sets that's sorely needed in the industry. So that's where the approach is. The difference for what I'm going to do with these things is every single one of those opportunities is scholarship to OU. Amen. So that means I'm looking for competitors, I'm looking for casters, I'm looking for influencers, I'm looking for journalists, and I'm looking for community TOs. That's all going to be at the same time. So that paints the better picture, a pipeline of what the industry needs to stabilize to create more opportunities, which will return the investment back to us as we grow our programs. Also further diversify the pro scene in more resources available to them, and then also create the pipelines in K through 12 and youth mentorship to help evolve the cultures of gamers, especially in games like COD and Overwatch specifically for the toxicity in them, having more mainstream acceptance and mental buy-in from parents and administrators at a younger age. Because a lot of us on the athletics pipeline in youth got T-ball mentorship from a coach at 6 years old, but we're not able to mentor youth in Call of Duty until they're 16 or plus. So imagine how different those communities of toxicity would be if we were able to influence and mentor them at an earlier stage in life, like traditional athletics alignments. So that would change the game, because that level of accountability would be.
I recall that Equinox put out something really recently about some like pipeline or like some performance aspect. Do you guys know anything about that?
Yeah, actually, I think Connor knows a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can talk. I can talk a little bit about that. Can I actually come back to that, Lucas? Would you mind? I had a question I was just about to ask. I just don't want to lose it. So, since you made the point when your first kind of long-winded, really great speech, Lucas, that I gave snaps to, you made a point of like, what if Riot were to pull their cards from the table and end Valorant? What happens to those kids? Since that point, I've been trying to listen to you guys' comments from the perspective of, okay, I'm the president of a university. I'm considering getting into esports.
Yeah.
What are my risk factors? What am I running the risk of? That sounds like a huge risk. And so far, it sounds like you guys have told me that, well, there might be some risk factors, like, relevant to like volatility of the, like ownership of the UI. There's a lot of added benefits to offset those. You guys started talking about recruitment. Mike, you just went into like different forms of curriculum that could spawn from that, and like the different, elements, different fields within esports. One of my favorite things about you, Mike, is your emphasis on those things. I've always admired that a lot. I think that's a great point. You look at like the thing like the Red Bull Campus Clash that's just popped up. That's basically a direct support from not only the developer themselves into Collegiate, but also third-party entities and organizations. So really quick, I just want to pose to you guys, if I'm this university that's very cynical about esports and don't want to do something this risky, what would you tell that person, that esports, basically what offsets the risk? Is it just those things I've mentioned? Anything else come to mind? Sorry, that was a very long-winded question, but I've just been thinking about that. So
yeah, that's a good one.
Anytime you walk into a conversation with anybody, you should always be looking to find some research, whether that's a climate that they're in, a regional thing. What's the sensibilities of religious factors? What's the sensibility of socioeconomic demographics? And then you can start to sculpt the answer to that question. So there's not a single answer to that. But a lot of times, going back to what Lucas's point was making in recruitment, if we talk about student engagement, that is a topic entirely to itself almost. We can talk about the value add of a university to a student's investment into the future of their lives and support of their communities just by utilizing the college experience of exposure to these things. The intentionality of developing teams for national competition is an extension of that. The development of casting production teams is an extension of that. But if you use that as that core fundamental, almost every university grades themselves on three things. That is recruitment, retention, and engagement. And that's why we have national rankings from how much freshmen we can keep to sophomores and the percentage of that. And so you can scope that to focus on administrators and to speak their own dialect of the same language. And really kind of drive the point home is like saying, guys, we can talk about the sensitivity of gun violence in video games all day, sure. But at the end of the day, if you build the program with the right culture in place, those students that you think are predominantly have violent tendencies would very much be the same students that are going out and building houses for Habitat for Humanity. And that's more about what you do with the program structure and the culture that you create, coupling and meeting them on their terms to influence them to be bigger than they are. So that the whole topic of education isn't from the standpoint of textbook, it's from the standpoint of mentorship and being able to impact culture to further improve society, which is the whole point of education at the core. Never mind the dollar figure, never mind the brand of it. As educators, as teachers in this world, our goal is to help people be better than they are at this time.
Amen.
Really, really well said. Really well said. Any other last final thoughts on that? Like, what are I think that is a huge driving point. Again, a huge purpose of education is not just, what we look at in terms of, recruitment, all those. It's also molding a person into a better person by the time they end their degree. Any lasting thoughts on that before we move on? Sorry, I didn't want to just interject this, but
I want to give like a shout out. I don't know, you guys might not have ever heard of them. They're really new, but there's a new program called Spin, and they've been working with high school students in esports. I know, Mike, you know them. I actually brought you up, and they're like, oh, man, we love Mike. I was like, yeah, me too. So Spin is actually their high school pipeline to Collegiate and Pro. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. But they also have these classes, and like I guess they're like classes or seminars to better their students and the players in aspects of esports that are more industrial rather than competitive. And so broadcasting, graphic design, videography, etc., stuff like that, leadership, communication, all the soft skills, or even just like trade skills that you might not really value in a competitor, but you would definitely value in a program. Those values that they're adding to their recruiting platform are ginormous, and I hope that they succeed and they create a model for others to follow. But I have a few things I want to talk about whenever we have like another chance to talk. So if you have another topic, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we're getting to the topic of between spin and the point about the NPA, the Knox Performance Academy. We're getting, I think, to a point where we can talk about what K through 12 can do better for collegiate, to set up for collegiate, and then what the private sector can also do better. I'll speak really quickly about the NPA, and then I'll toss it back over to you guys. So what the Knox Performance Academy is essentially is a coaching pipeline that we want to provide coaching to kids ages 13 and up. We want to provide coaching that is in a sense like paradigm shifting from how esports coaching and I think a lot of traditional coaching is done, where we want to have a big emphasis on the holistic side of it, like Mike said, mentoring. I coach a few kids here privately right now, and I've realized while I've been coaching them is that it's half about getting better at the game. It's half about learning how to think about the game better. And the other half is building a relationship with this kid. They find a place they belong. They find a place they can talk to this coach they have on Discord about, the competitive scene they're in, and like just talk and have a good time that they may not have at home in their school. And so again, we hope the NPA can be a really good thing for kids going through school that do not have a community like this, that don't feel like they belong to a core group. We can provide that coaching. We can help them to be better holistically, and then set them up to go to a university if that's what they choose to do in life, and kind of be just launched into a Rogers State, an OU, an OC, an OCU, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're trying. That's, I guess, part of my vision is I really want to help. We want to help collegiate as much as we can, period. That's an Equinox, like, absolutely a point. This is kind of, I think, one of our first steps in trying to do that through this NPA, as we're calling it. So
I've actually recruited a couple students who were like low gold, low silver in League of Legends, and this was when they first started, and they immediately took coaching from specific people and all that other stuff, and they actually hit like high diamond, and they've consistently been at that state. So coaching from an early standpoint can help. I'm not too sure about like if you're 2,000 hours in the game, might be a different story, but coaching I think can definitely help. Also, what you're talking about, building a community, what do you do for students that aren't in a high level of competition, especially with the program like ours that are athletic? What do you do to get them to come to OC, or how do you engage them if they're already on your campus? From what I'm doing, I'm building a gaming club. So it's going to be student run, student led, and it's going to be all inclusive for anything from tabletop to mobile to PC, console, etc. So building an arm of your program that supports the casual players is massive, because what's the stream of LCS without like the silvers and golds who love watching pro play and emulating pro play just in their own right? How do professionals set them apart from the non-professionals? And so having that casual base should be a given. Like, it should be super supported and being one of your main priorities as a collegiate program. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick.
No, and you're absolutely right, because like I think a lot of universities, especially in my experience, like they do kind of neglect that casual side, and like those are your grassroots there. Those are the people that are going to support and cheer on your teams. Like, you need to build that into your program immediately from the beginning, and if you're not, you're doing it wrong.
Right. And I'm going to build on that, because I could talk for a lifetime on that specific topic. But if we want to talk about the business side of the intentionality of strategic development, who's your future alumni supporters? Who's your future supporters of your university, of your brand? Who's the current fan base of your teams now? If you're just putting teams out of your university with no support in the communities, then what are you doing it for in the first place? It is literally just a very shallow game of intentional, I just need tuition money for my university. But when you start to engage that community, and this is also Colt's origin too, just as Paul's origin back in the Boise time, is very similar. Is that student pulse is what is causing the innovations on these universities' campuses. The student forefront and the voice of the OU mission has been since day one. where we picked your own good friends, Jack and Alex from Get Wrecked, as students of mine at the time, helped to strategize the future of the program that we were going to build at OU, and is still on the same roadmap that we set back in 2016, only elevating through its planned milestones. And so, like, for instance, like our community, that hub, which feeds every single pillar, whether that is competition or casting and everything in between, is now pushing past 1,700 members for OU's campus. And granted, that's a testament. That number, again, to put into perspective, is because OU has a 30,000 population student base. So I want to make that really clear, because that number is obviously huge, but it's in perspective to the student body that I have. The percentage would honestly be identical if you were to put it in a percentage for the other universities that cater to their students within a specific margin. So, but yeah, that student voice is so critical to the success of the OU story, and it will forever be highlighted as long as I'm at OU, because I couldn't have done this alone. Sure, the vision was set, sure, the strategy was set, but the executors that we have created and the leadership that we have mentored through that program, they can talk like I can. They sit in meetings like I do, not as there to watch, but to be contributors to conversation of business practicum. So that's the other thing is that obviously Equinox hired professionals to run Equinox. Well, who's creating them? And that's the point of what we should be doing on the macro level too, is that we should also be looking at all those pipelines and everything in between.
For sure. Cole, Paul?
I just want to talk about a little more about the high school scene around Oklahoma. You know, one big thing that's super important for us is, you know, creating this pipeline for colleges so that there are students that are actively looking for esports opportunities. The OESL has been a great service for students, but one of the problems with it is that there's so many high schools that have differing opinions on what's okay to play and what isn't. Overwatch, you know, being such a huge game in the realm of collegiate esports, has been super difficult for these high schools to get into because they can't justify the violence in Overwatch. Overwatch, you know, not even the most violent shooter, means that they're not going to get into, absolutely not, CSGO, Call of Duty, and Valorant. So a lot of it is, we've been having, you know, it just comes down to conversations, bringing them into your space, welcome these people that, you know, don't necessarily agree with you know, esports being either validated or being too violent or just not being the right thing, and show them what it can do for students. Show them that the students that were getting D's, C's in school are now engaging so much more with their classmates. They're happier. They're finding community. That's what it's all about. And I just wanted to make that point really quick, that we need to engage these communities that don't want to be a part of esports, because they're the ones that need it the most.
It's a really valuable point, Paul. Thanks. That's really good. Cole, you got any closing thoughts on that one before we shift gears back to the topic we'd actually typed out?
Yeah, I think there were some things we covered. I just wanted to mention like the student body community and everything. For new schools, don't let your school cut that arm off. That's kind of, I'm just gonna throw us under the bus. That's kind of something that happened here. I had a body of students. I really did. I had a bunch of people, but none of them played esports. We played Smash, Mario Kart, fighter games. We played all these different types of games once a week. And then this esports came in, and I got my arm chopped off because I lost all my players. Like, they're like, hey, I don't even play an esport. I don't want to be a part of this. Basically because I'm not good enough to play here. I don't want to be in a competitive vibe. And I'm like, no, it's not like what this is going to be. It's going to be two separate things. So we had to split our casual and our esports thing up, but that shouldn't be like, it should be competitive, yes, for my athletes, but the whole program, I should be able to do game nights when I want them. I should be able to do things like that. And I should be able to engage all these students for casual play. And that shouldn't be a two different things. Like, in the server is two different things, but as people, they shouldn't be treated like, you know, athletes versus like non-athletes. And that's kind of how it is right now. So that kind of sucks for us, because I'm trying to build that back up. But for new schools, like, I definitely would say build that body, make sure that body's active in it, like a president, tournament organizer, sorry, and like get those students engaged, because they'll stay engaged. And then keep your athletes as a side thing, because those the tournament organizer president can be engaging as well as engaging with the casual players, so then you guys aren't causing two different things like how we have it here. So that's the only thing I had to make a point on.
So it's good to know for us how we can advocate for you guys, and that seems like something that we can absolutely do. You know, if we ever are in the room with any of those people, we can. I think, Mike, you made a lot of good points on this front of, you know, these casual gamers are your fans, they're your supporters of your university, they're your future alumni supporters. So there's a lot of great points to be made to advocate for that, because I think it is very important. But good point, Colt. Thanks. Sorry, I've been talking way too much. I'll shut up.
No, this is great. That's the whole point of this. Like, this is a roundtable.
How do you support those types of community drivers. How do you support them? How do you give them value? How do you incentivize them to continue doing what they're doing and to innovate and improve? Scholarships is one way to do it, but you got to think of many other ways to do it, because finance might not be their main issue for going to college. And if you're just purely going off a scholarship, then you're going to lose them. So you got to find many different ways to keep driving value added benefits to your program.
Yeah, and kind of like to speak on what Mike said, because like, I was a huge League of Legends player, and I mean, never like good or anything. So I went like the tournament organization side, right? And I'm super, passionate about media and communications. And so I just dove into esports and like made my own opportunities doing that. So like, I think colleges now, which again, that was 6 years ago, colleges now, like you guys are set up like to provide those opportunities for people like me, like, because I wanted to like write and talk and interview like all these random people in the state who just play this game. Like I made it important to the community. Right. So like looking for those opportunities is something like colleges, you guys have you were set up so well to capitalize on. So yeah, definitely wanted to hit back on that again. Okay, I'm going to switch gears for us a little bit. We've talked a lot about collegiate, talked a lot about like the past, the present, where you guys are now, setting that scene. So now I want to kind of jump into like how we can mix collegiate and professional, right? And I think we were talking a lot about like how OU has their entire program set up. There's like so many different pillars and divisions with like the news and media, production, etc. So because like for us here, starting a professional organization, basically from the ground up, a professional esports organization in Oklahoma, in the Midwest, like that has been a huge struggle for us. Like again, like, esports isn't super validated here in the state. Definitely not. It's growing in the Midwest in general. So what are some ways that we can engage you guys? And like, how can we like bring our energies together to help elevate the state and esports in general together?
I think one thing that that has been super important for our student engagement and our general acceptance of esports in Oklahoma has been for this more recent thing we started up called the OACE. Colt is a part of it. It's just kind of an open invite Oklahoma esports collaboration space for all the colleges that are in the area. And we've just been running tournaments. We've been running small things to try and create those. I could talk about it earlier. The local rivalry. This isn't a college on the East Coast you've never heard of and never touched, in any way. But it's a college that you know of, that you might know the people that are going there. You might know the people on the team's names that you're competing against, and makes everything so much more exciting. I think that's one thing to help add validity to the state, validity to esports in the area. And I think I'm not sure exactly how Knox can be involved in that, but I'd definitely like to hear you guys' ideas as well.
Yeah, I'd be curious too. I mean, I think that, if that ends up being like a collaborative space, and again, a lot of the goal, of kind of what you do with your university students when you launch them is to keep them in esports professional areas. I think we can help in that in some way, but yeah, that is something I think we can work on more in the future to figure out how to collaborate in that space. Because I think that's a space that we don't want to intrude in and try and, steer at all. But if we can help and move the tide, that's a totally different thing, which I think is valuable. So that's a good thing to know about and think about, though.
And if we're just talking to the scope of the private sector versus collegiate too, that's a whole different, it's not a whole different topic, but it's an expanded topic. And so how can some mom and pop shop participate in the collegiate esports scene if they're invested in it in one fashion or another? There's 100 different ways that they could do it, but exposure, I think, is the cheapest, easiest, and most efficient way to do it too. So if they're able to provide like some form of niche exposure or help to their program of choosing in their own capacity as a private enterprise, that I think is the most efficient way to go about it. Okay. Let's give an example. Let's say like a diner, right? A mom and pop diner, and their 18-year-old son, his friend is going into OU to play collegiate Overwatch. What do they do to help support them if they want to? They could provide some sort of like flyer in front of their store or on a table or something like that. They could have like a discount. They can name an item on the menu after the program or esports in general, and that might strike a conversation. Just small stuff like that is the best way, I think, for the private sector to really help engage on a cheap, no budget basis.
Another extension of that, of opportunity is, again, going back to the recruitment mission. And so OU and I will butt heads on this all the time, and I imagine any other university administrators will butt heads on us on this front as well. Is that I don't really care where students go to school post high school, as long as the program speaks to them, because I don't want to be an extension of just debt accumulation of going to somewhere that doesn't serve the purpose of feeding their needs of what they see their future being. However, I'm also a proprietor that not everybody needs to go to college. And this topic is not necessarily a conduit for them to just go to college for the sake of going to college. So there is a massive opportunity of responsibility that we have in painting the picture of opportunity, being very transparent with that. And one of the biggest things that can do is, when panels like this are a good start, but more frequent, and not just us, but also the students that are in our ranks, that are underneath that administration pillar, because I'm tired, honestly, personally, I'm tired of being on panels. I'm tired of being on spotlights. I would love for that president of the organization to be there. I'd love that director of intercollegiate competition to be there, which paints a different perspective that's more relatable to the upperclassmen of high school, because they're not that far departed culturally and age demographic. That also means that things like esports career fairs, esports, informational fairs of open houses, which I imagine as Equinox gets closer to some physical space opportunities, could be something that could be realized very quickly, where it is a neutral ground for universities to kind of get over themselves and just come together to share information. Because if OCU is a better fit for our youth, great. I don't care. Go. It speaks to you by all means, because we're so premature in this stage that any student that enters into the collegiate realm under the banner of esports energies is an elevated win for all of us. Because we are still fighting for mainstream acceptance across the board culturally. And in the Midwest, we are not the most innovative of states and regions of the U.S. And so we can't afford to be so competitive that we're inhibiting the growth of the topic over our own needs individually. And so I think that is the power of bringing in a third party that is not in the collegiate scene to galvanize the collective force of what a panel like this represents, coupled with the other universities who don't have speakers here, that there are plenty other ones in Oklahoma as well. So that I think is a great, another great opportunity for Equinox in its unique space and its unique resources that it will continue to grow, that can leverage something on an annual basis or semesterly basis or anything, just as a great informational. Career tech's coming on board, high school programs elevating, more governance in the national scale, learn about the OU journey. Learn about
Esports convention when...
I would love for us to be able to. I want to speak this into existence now, because I would love for our event space that's pending to be able to one day host. Okay, let's bring every student and every university leader from across the state to one place for a weekend conference with multiple days of seminars led by those in the university, led by private sector, led by K through 12 educators who are trying to feed into those universities. Like, let's get everyone to the table. And if that's all Equinox does, and we're able to facilitate that, I think we've succeeded in something. So I think that is a good,
Right. So there you go. Heard it first. Equinox educational information.
I was gonna say, I mean, I played the convention or two in my life. I could probably, think of
but it's one of those things where the other layer to that, because that can get messy really quick too, and I'm going to say this as well, is that it needs to be a safe place that's neutral territory. Because we don't want to make it where the collegiate energies have the ability of paying for ad space. Honestly, award it to being representative. You obviously have equal footing, because the resource pools from these universities vary depending on their classification. Sure. And this does need to be level playing ground. Let the third party sponsors, let the Equinox, let the non-collegiate endemic energy sponsor that event to get their brands in front of these students, versus allowing the universities to drive the narrative. Because I guarantee you, OU's a pit bull in the wallet. And I don't want that to be the case. I don't want it to be, because it's inhibiting the goal of what I'm trying to create, which is the opportunities, regardless of the brand that's over it. And that's the significant thing that I would say is that big opportunity to do something that's truly impactful, where it does keep the playing field level. Because maybe a school has a better financial fit for somebody, and somebody shouldn't feel bad about that ever. Maybe there's a specific program that speaks to you that one other university doesn't have, and no one should ever feel bad about that anyway. And so that's where it's important to have comprehensive esports programs in the collegiate sense, because maybe you don't care about news and media and all that stuff. So OU doesn't resonate with you, and maybe OC does. All more power to it. But maybe you still want to learn because you didn't know anything about Rogers State prior, and they also fit into that financial budget, or OCU or SWASU or Cameron and Lawton and University of Tulsa and all these other universities of institutional supported elevation. So I think that's Knox's extreme power in the topic of galvanizing collegiate energies for the business growth of the industry and validation, and also giving us a kind of neutral ground where there is peace and the ability of just saying, let's create opportunities. Because I am definitely of the mindset that if the program that I've built speaks to you, then I've done my diligence. But I shouldn't have to force my brand down your throat. I should say, here's the table. If you want to learn, come and learn. If you don't, great. Here's a plethora of other opportunities. Take and choose, make your decision based on your own wants in your life versus what I'm going to say to you and saying that OU is the place you need to come. So,
yeah, really good. Anyone else have thoughts? I definitely want to share some from the Equinox perspective of what we can do to better, be a marriage between, private sector and collegiate. Any other thoughts from you guys on the panel on this as well?
I just think we need to clone Mike and put him in like the top 200 universities and then just let him do his work. And then esports will be bigger than everything on the planet.
Let them go free, yeah.
All of you are powerful. All of you are capable of the same very thing. And if some of you are equals or greater than me in your own rights, it's just collective energy.
I agree with you, Lucas. I also think if we can get some Lucases and some Pauls and some Colts in these top 200 universities, I think it'd be amazing as well. Like I think the four of you are showing a lot of, like, you've thought about this so much, and there's a lot of passion in this call right now, and that is a priceless commodity. So I think all your universities are very lucky to have you. So.
Sorry, there's something in Mike I wanted to touch on, which is that the student that's a good fit for OCU isn't a student that's a good fit for OU, which isn't a student that's a good fit for Rogers State, which isn't a good fit for OC. It's all going to be different. So whenever you have the chance to, if our student comes to you and you know for a fact that this is a student that wants to go to this university, even though they're coming to you, I have sent students away and said, like, this is probably not the college for you. You might want to look at this one. This also has a great esports program. The resources we have is OklahomaEsports.org. If your university is not listed, please reach out to me. I will get your university on that list. It is, I think, currently 16 universities that are in Oklahoma that all have, it's all the information about their program. What do they offer? What games do they play? What esports are they in? What do they broadcast? Do they have a major? Do they have scholarships? It's all on that website. And I pass that out to students who have asked me, like, what college should I be looking at? So we pass it out to the OESL. We pass it out to Oath League, which is another great league in Oklahoma that runs leagues for kind of younger groups. But absolutely, like, we want everyone on that list that we can get.
Yeah.
Cool.
Colt, do you have any last thoughts on this?
No, everything's been covered. And that's exactly the panel thing was what I was going to talk about. But Mike covered that perfectly. So, are those things all set?
I have some thoughts from our perspective. So obviously I already touched on, the Knox Performance Academy stuff. We want to help students that are going to be going to universities to be better equipped to have success there. Again, if they choose to go to college at one of the colleges, represented here or whatever. But in addition, once they get to that point, we also want to provide opportunities, like maybe we've coached them for a couple of years before going to college. Let's give them the opportunity to now be the coach, in a paid way or in an internship way for credit, whatever that might look like, at a university here at Equinox to, again, pour back into that next generation as someone that learned and came up. And then as they're graduating as well, and again, throughout their college experience as well, having panels they can communicate and network across the state, et cetera, et cetera. And then as they're graduating, we're not going to be able to offer jobs to every student that graduates, with esports related things in the state. But we do want to be able to help be a network connection. If as we're building relationships with brands like HyperX or Red Bull or Alienware or these brands that are, whether they're completely endemic to esports or not, we want to be able to say, look, this guy just came from Rogers State, Colt Berry, that's amazing. Like, let's connect you with him and be that middleman. If we can do those things, even if it means we lose someone and this, like the state of Oklahoma loses someone, at least it keeps them in esports and keeps them working.
Yeah.
Then
we also go ahead.
I was going to say, and you also don't really need to push for those tier 1 type of esports companies too in the industry. You can, if a student is really invested in this after they graduate, they're invested in esports and whatnot. What I said earlier about just any private sector company, even a mom and pop shop, like I was saying earlier, they can find ways, and we just need to help them find those ways, to support it. Yeah. So
a big part of esports, is extracurriculars, like you're saying. There's tons of these amateur teams that are popping up that need managers, broadcasters, social media managers. There are just so many opportunities, and it's working for free, but it is a way to get experience. So if you're truly, truly determined in esports is the industry that you want to work in, these are great resources for you.
Absolutely. And, Yeah, like we just recently have held, our last two Smashcades. For one of them, we had the vice president of esports from UCO casting, and this past one and the one before that, I actually casted alongside Slaw, who is over at OU, doing a lot of great esports stuff in Smash. There, I think he's vice president of the club, Mike, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Like he is incredibly sharp, and again, like even if all we can do is give someone like Slaw an outlet to cast Smash professionally,
opportunities.
That's
Yeah,
I'm happy to just be able to do that. So I want to have those big picture things in mind, like we talked about, like you're mentioning, Mike, with having a conference and doing these big things to facilitate, kind of to bring everyone to the table and allow an equally decibel level conversation across the board. I also want us to be able to do small things, and again, from how you guys can help us, just these conversations are honestly some of the best things. I mean, just hearing it straight from 5 universities across the state of what we can be doing to better provide is really invaluable. So I would just say let's keep these conversations going.
For sure.
And however we can continue to facilitate that relationship is good.
Yep.
For
and
all
any
the
kind
viewers
of
that are watching,
we could partner on. Like, we'd love to partner with you guys and see if it's a good fit for us and a good fit for you, and see, what cool events we can host in Oklahoma, again, to get both of our names out there and to elevate esports as a whole in the Midwest and specifically in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Paul, you're going to make a point.
For all the viewers that are watching, and for people that are interested in kind of getting into those opportunities, is there someone they can contact at Knox if like we have a student that wants to cast, or if there's just a viewer who's like really interested in casting, very passionate, who can they reach out to?
Yeah, for sure. So specifically for Smash, that's what we have opportunities for. You can just reach out to Austin or me or Connor, literally any of us. If you're just in our community Discord, I'm very active in there, moderating all the time. So just drop us a Discord message, drop us a Twitter DM.
It can be very casual, but yes, like we have emails. If you know one of our first names, just throw an @equinox.team at the end, and that's how you can reach us by email if you'd like to be so formal. But again, we take DMs all the time, whatever social media platform you're on. Yep. Before we end this call, I want you guys to kind of give the same word of how someone, whether they're a high school student watching,
for sure,
or someone interested in participating in your university currently. I want you guys to also provide that same outlook. So thank you, Paul, for bringing that up.
Go ahead, Colt, and start. Basically, you guys just sign off, remind everyone who you are, give your university a shout out, any other shout outs you want to give. So we'll start with Colt.
Oh, okay. I'm the student manager at Rogers State University, and you can contact basically me or mainly just me on all of our socials from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just RSU Esports. And then if you want to email us, it's just esports@student.rsu.edu. But if you send us the same thing as them, you just send us a DM on any of the social medias. I run all of them. I will directly respond to you, and then I can set up a Discord call that day or whenever, and I can get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay.
Love it.
And I am Mike Moog Aguilar, the Director of Esports and Co-Curricular Innovation for the University of Oklahoma. There's only one Oklahoma. I have to say it, sorry. It's a cultural thing for the state.
Baby.
And so,
it's allowed. It's allowed.
Hey, so yep. And so you can reach us pretty much on any social media platform at OU Esports, one word, as well as esports@ou.edu. And we are hyper active on responses within minutes, if not an hour or two. As I definitely am glued to my phone for that. But quite a bit of big news coming out of the Sooner Nation here in the next 30 to 45 days. So look out for that in the topics of scholarships, venue, curriculum. Otherwise, sit tight for that.
Yeah, and again, my name is Lucas Hayworth. I go by the tag Maestro. Not really spelled that way, but it is what it is. So the best way for you to reach me out, at least verbally, is by my email. So lucas.hayworth@oc.edu. Easiest way to do it. I prefer Discord, so just if you email me, just send me your Discord IGN or whatever, your tag, and we'll get talking on there. And yeah, that's basically it.
And for us, I'm Paul Vaughn, head coach and esports coordinator for Oklahoma City University. You can follow all our socials at OCU Esports, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm on Discord as Coach Callisto. If you ever see me running around, you can message me, feel free. But also, probably best to reach me first, kind of like Lucas is saying, at pvaughn@okcu.edu.
Got it. Okay, guys. Well, again, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been a very enlightening and insightful hour plus here at Equinox. So again, thank you guys so much for joining us. We are going to be signing off. Join us here in about 2 weeks. We will actually be talking with the Kansas City Pioneers, another professional organization here in the Midwest. So that'll be a super exciting conversation. My name's Ari Payne West. I'm the Director of Community and Communication here at Equinox Esports.
I'm Connor Knudsen, Director of Competition here at Equinox Esports. Again, thank you all so much for tuning
You're
in.
gonna
And
do that again with your call sign, sir.
all right. I'm Connor Goopy Canoopy Knutson, because that always sounds so good in a row.
It's such a
Gosh dang it. I gotta
lot.
do something about that. But
rebrand.
yeah.
3 times
All right.
faster.
I think
All
you
right.
sign us off, Ariel.
Okay,
I'm
I'll
too
sign us off.
flustered,
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And follow us all on our social medias, Equinox OKC, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye,
Go
guys.
Collegiate.
Be the battle.